All right, what's up, everybody? This is Adrian Ross, and this is the Adrian Ross Show. Um, you can check me out at Madbacker, Maddbacker, on Twitter, on YouTube, on Facebook. It's just my name. On Instagram, it's Adrian Ross _ Madbacker. Check everything out there. Have a lot of various different things, different topics, fun, cool stuff. Check it out. But here up on the Adrian Ross Show, I try to give some of my knowledge, and I hope that you guys give me feedback. And this is all just for everybody, for us as a whole to grow. I want to give it from the perspective that I've been brought up as I've grown up to be in school, in sports, in professional ranks. Just what's been taught and what I feel should change, or why is it the way it is. When I came out of Colorado State in 1998, I went to the Cincinnati Bengals. When I came back, I had to go back to school to pay some parking tickets that my boy Joey Porter kind of racked up in this car that I was letting him drive. So I had to go back and pay my parking tickets. So I came back to school, and one thing that I remember is what I want you guys to think back to is cell phones. So, back then, no one really had a cell phone in college unless you had a family with money or something. It wasn't common for someone in college to have a cell phone. So in the NFL, now I had money to be able to afford a cell phone, and that was basically all I did was talk on the phone. So that was very important to me. So I came back to school, came back to campus, and I had that. Remember that Chrome phone that was on the Matrix that like slipped down? That's the phone I had. So I had the little Chrome phone. So I remember coming back out to Colorado State, going to practice, and when I went up to meet with some friends later, they had already heard that I was already at practice from some of the players, and they named my whole outfit on what I was wearing. And what I remember vividly was them speaking on the cell phone. They were saying like, oh, he has a cell phone now. And I just say that to say, from the perspective that you're at, for me, I'm in a locker room full of guys with cell phones. But on the college campus, they were looking at me from what they knew of me the year before into seeing me now. So that's a part of when they say, oh, he's changed and he has this and he has that. But it's like, I didn't really change. I just had money to be able to be who I am. And the phone was something really important to me. But anyway, technology, just to say how fast it changes is, at that time it was like, I think I had the AT&T one rate plan. 149 or whatever it was to have long distance, and just one rate. That was the rate per month. So at that time, phone companies were charging you for long distance. Remember, it was like weekends free with some phone companies and stuff like that, but all the charges were all based off of calling long distance. Then all of a sudden, two-way pagers came about. Two-way pagers. Y'all remember these things. So that was where everybody was texting from. It was the two-way pagers. And at the same time the two-way pagers came out, remember the Nextel? You guys remember this? Like the good old Nextel. Everybody was chirping. Guys were chirping and all that stuff. So it was the two-way pagers. It was the Motorola chirp, but text message wasn't really big. Then Sprint came out and they started talking about text messaging. So I remember having that Nextel, and it kind of made the phone be obsolete, because I'm like, well, I'm carrying around my Nextel phone and I'm carrying around my two-way pager. Remember the whole beaming your contact and all that. But then all of a sudden the companies were like, okay, well, there's two different things. So now we're going to go ahead and make it be into one. So then they started coming with the phones where you could be able to text instead of carrying two things. So that made the two-way pager go obsolete. Then they went to Blackberries, where you could start sending, this is a Motorola Q, um, and they started making it be where you could get your emails on your phone. Because I remember being up in the locker room, we still had to go to the computer lab to go try to look up your email. Email wasn't even really that big then. People were still using fax machines. Now, this is all within the span of, 5 years so far. That's how fast technology is moving. I remember this Q. I found a way to make ringtones by the chip. I had a chip in here that had music. And I found a way to make the song play when people called. So that was ringtones. Remember how ringtones, you could buy a ringtone and all that stuff was going on back then? I just say that to say that like technology moves and it evolves for our betterment. When I got to the Bengals, it's funny because we were in a DVD era, but as far as film, they were still using VHS. So it seems like I played in such an old era because the technology was older. And it was probably like my third year. The only reason I had a VCR was to watch film. And so when I started thinking about going back home in the summer, I'm like, man, I have to get a VCR just to watch film. And one day I asked and I said, just knowing how technology is, I'm like, can I have my film on a DVD? And they were like, yeah. So when they started dropping off my film, they were giving me a DVD and then they give all the rest of the linebackers VHS, which I don't understand why. But eventually the whole meeting room and then eventually everybody started getting DVDs. But it just moved. Now, there's neither. Like there's no DVDs. There's just downloading and uploading to the cloud. So it's changing. And so why I say all that is, for me, with the state of the education system here in this country, I feel that we say a lot of things to the youth and it's adults coming up with it, saying it to children. And the meanings are different. It's like the meaning of love to a 40-year-old is totally different than to a 2-year-old, even though they can hear the same word. So it's a lot of adults that are making up things and they're trying to say the same word and they want the children to understand from their adult perspective. And that's not how it is. But that's the system that we're under. So that's what we keep using, even to its detriment. So it's just like I said before, this last presidential election is I don't understand the whole process of why is it vote for somebody to make up rules and laws and statutes and budgets for what we want. It's like the education system. Money's always being cut, money's always being taken, but yet the process is still the same, saying vote for this person and then let's sit back and look and see, hopefully they give it funding. I don't understand how that's a process. And let alone how someone that has nothing to do or know anything about it, we can pick one person and then they're the main ones who are in charge or appointing people with their help to be in charge of setting the education budget amounts. That doesn't make any sense to me. What also doesn't make sense to me is why are the children still reading the same stuff we grew up with 30 years ago, 30, 40, 50 years ago? Why are our children still reading the same books? I just showed you technology moved. Oh, by the way, I forgot that we used to carry these around. Cameras. We used to carry cameras around and take pictures. And for all my friends that know me, I was real big on this. I've been taking pictures since probably like my senior year in high school. And nobody was taking pictures when I was taking them. They're like, oh, here's Adrian again taking pictures. Now that they're on everybody's phones, everybody's taking pictures. So much that there's all these apps that just involves taking pictures. but nobody was on taking pictures when I was carrying cameras around in my pocket. But now, because it's more convenient, it's being used. But again, that technology moved within a 10-year span so fast. But in the education system, it doesn't make sense. Like, how are we still teaching our youth Of Mice of Men, The Great Gatsby, Tom Sawyer, Romeo and Juliet, Lord of the Flies? How are they still reading these same books that go back to a space and time where damn near no diversity, no technology, but yet that's still the basis of what goes on, and we want to keep telling them to value education, have an education, value it. Where so me and athletics, that's something that I always heard. My mom's teacher, my dad was an administrator, he was a principal. So in my household, me and my sister heard it all the time, and which was a great thing. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that having an education for who you want to be and what you want to be, but there's different things about it, and I don't feel that we're being honest with our youth and telling them exactly how it is. Like, we're telling them that they can work hard for what they want and they're going to get it. Well, no, like, that's not necessarily true. It depends on what you're trying to get. If it's an individual thing and it just requires you working hard, then yeah, if you work hard at it, you'll get it. But if it requires another human to allow you to do it, then that doesn't necessarily mean so. And for me in sports, I find it odd when I look back on it. It's like, why, when someone says that they want to be a professional athlete, is the number one thing is, whoa, man, you better have something to fall back on, because not a lot of people make that. Well, I always remember being in the classroom and they say, well, what do you guys want to be? And people will say whatever they want to say. And generally, we always hear, we see on TV or movies, is a doctor, a lawyer. Hey, you can even be the president. So what I find odd with that is the probability of becoming the president or being a professional athlete is higher for being a professional athlete. But yet, there's nothing per se being taught to those individuals that would want to be in that field, other than the on game, other than the in game part of it. It's always a negative connotation on the other end. Hey, it's like, I hope, you better hope this and you better hope that. Well, why do we tell them that they could be the president then, when it's less of a probability that they'll be the president? But yet, we learn about the legislative branch, the executive branch, the judicial branch. We're taught all these things about politics and this old ass system for what? Because it's working? Is it working right now? And what I've seen is, I see a whole lot of people with degrees that can't get a job. So how do we keep telling them, have something to fall back on? What are those teachers out there that have been laid off? Did we tell them to have something to fall back on? So like, for me, I'm just, I always hear that, and as I see it, it's like, well, that always sounds good at the time, and it seems like that's what we're a nation of doing, is we want to like tell our kids, well, something that sounds good for the time being, and then, hey, we all know you'll kind of figure it out when you get there. Well, me specifically, when it comes back to athletics, that's where I always end up with it is are the coaching staffs at these universities, are they school faculty? Yeah, right? Like, they're school faculty. So are they teaching? Are they teachers? Or is that, because this faculty is the name of it, but some faculty do different things, right? There's administrative. So obviously we know that they're coaching and they're not necessarily teaching a class, but they're school faculty. So on one end, we keep telling them, okay, well, hey, they're students and they shouldn't be paid. But on the days that there's games or meets or whatever you have in whatever sport an individual in college is that class that day? Is class being taught? Like, I'm trying to figure out how their school staff, their school faculty, and they're a part of the school system a certain way, but yet they're able to be paid for a reason. So if we're not going to talk about pain, and because this is an institute, these are institutions of higher learning, well, then let's keep it on the school level. Like, you don't not get to get it both ways. You don't not get to pay them, and you don't not get to give them credit, even though you're giving everyone else credit for what they're doing. You're giving credit to the teachers or the coaches or the faculty that are supposed to be teaching these individuals. Another thing on that, or off of that, I should say, is, have you ever heard of an athlete? Let's just go to football. A football player having an internship at a professional team. Why don't we hear about that? Because everything is a negative connotation when in this nation, when we deal with certain individuals that have a certain skill set. Everyone's going to college to get a certain skill set, to have a job or have a career or own or have a business, operate a business. But yet these certain entities are steered away from knowing about their business. And I only have experience of knowing with football players. When, it's like the whole agent thing, or, it's a violation to get a drink of water from an agent. It's I think at U.S.A. there was a student, a grad student, that was taking one class down there to be an agent, that gave a player a ride on a golf cart to practice. And that was deemed a privilege, and the player was suspended for that. Why is it such a negative connotation when someone that has skills gets to receive a benefit for it, only for the athletes though? If a tech student had all these skills, they're able to get an internship at Google or Facebook. Why is it such a negative connotation for the athletes? When people are graduating with their undergraduate degrees taught by these professors and these students going to these classes, well, the classes are an hour or so. Some classes, some labs I was in was like 3 hours. Well, practice 3-4 days a week for 4 or 5 years by the college's faculty, these coaches. How are these individuals not receiving any credit for it? Shouldn't these teachers that are hired as faculty, if that's what it is, what are they doing? Shouldn't they be teaching something? Shouldn't these players, these student athletes, if you're not talking about monetarily and you're calling them students, what is the faculty giving them? Because when you say that they go to all the other classes, they receive credit for it. Now, why do they receive credit with some of your faculty, but the other faculty that they spend 3-4 hours with and they travel around the nation with, they don't receive any credit for that? And they have a whole lot of, I guess if you're talking about it in a school sense, there's a whole lot of field trips on the weekends that are televised. These televised field trips. And there's these outside entities that are involved out there with them, called referees or officials. Are the referees staff or faculty? No. So already right there's a whole different outside entity that they're bringing to be involved with school faculty and students of the school. But yet there's all these other individual parties that are able to be hired and put together with. So how can it be both? How can we, this goes back to, like I said, high school, the Great Gatsby and Tom Sawyer and these books that we're reading. How can everything still be the same? Like when you're teaching people and they're getting smarter, they're not going to be bamboozled by this dumb stuff no more. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. It doesn't make sense that in everything else, all these other faculty are teaching these students to be something, but yet these coaches that are faculty they're supposed to be teaching, I would assume, right? This is an institution of higher learning, and the school is paying this faculty that are called coaches, so they should be teaching. So out of 4 or 5 years, you would think that the people that they've taught are graduating with something. Like they should be able to come back and coach, right? But no, what happens is when and if they want to come back, they don't start at a level of they already went and got their masters. Now I'm talking about not the ones that just end in college. I'm talking about the ones that go on and get their masters and PhD that go play pro. Right? Those are the ones that have received in this college setting and what they're telling us, right? If people are moving on to the next level, right? So you got your undergrad, you got your bachelor's, then you go master's, then you go PhD. So it's like if you go vet school, if you go to law school, if you go to medical school, right? Those are the next level. So in each different field, people are going off to the next level and receiving more information. In the medical field, these doctors go off and they do things and they write it down and it's passed and it's published and everyone meets up and talks about it. In football, it doesn't happen. Like I never had one college coach call me and say, man, like you guys really shut down that Russian attack. What did you guys use? Like what, because it's not deemed in the process of how we do things. And people are so one track mind that you have a lot of coaches that still want to feel that you're still the student just because of a title. So, and I use my college a lot just for an example. So it's like Colorado State. Well, the professional team down the street is the Denver Broncos. So the coaching staffs in said colleges, if you're in Texas and you're in Houston, well, you have the Texans. If you're around Dallas, and a lot of coaches meet up and talk football and schemes, and they talk a lot. Well, what always made me laugh is how none of the colleges, well, for most part, now your smart coaches do this, but I've never seen or heard any of my own boys like a Joey Porter or Clark Haggans, who Pittsburgh had a number 1 D for a long time. I've never seen coaches call and ask, what are you guys doing? What did you do? But the same staff will go down the street to, let's say, the Broncos, and they'll meet and they'll talk all about everything, right? And as they should. But what's funny to me is nobody reaches out to these players with the masters or with the PhDs because it's not deemed that. And we can see that cosmetically for how college football looks. If this is a 60-something, 70% what they call so-called African Americans, who are really Moors, if football and basketball is predominantly that, then you would think the people that have mastered it are going to be the majority of who's involved in it. But it's exactly the opposite, because the reality of it is, and instead of sugarcoating these kids, is if there's other humans in charge of something, it doesn't matter how hard you work, it's the process that we're involved in. That's why we still do the dumb election and still electing and the process how we do it. I watched all these debates this past year. I didn't really hear anybody say nothing about the education system other than just some fluff about, oh, okay, let's talk education. It wasn't really nothing real involved in it. It's just, here's the process and here's how it is. So that's what I tell guys. That's what I like to tell the youth is, there's a process to things that you want to do. And you have to give yourself a chance just to be able to be involved in the process. And of course, everyone has to have a backup plan, because when you get to a certain level in that process, there's going to be someone else in charge that's involved on bringing you in. It doesn't really necessarily matter about your skills. Now, in the professional ranks of actually playing the sport, it involves skills. But that's actual on the field. That's not the business side of things. Fans and parents want to tell these guys, be loyal, and loyalty means something to me. And well, that there's no loyalty in the business of professional sports. It is what it is. It sounds good, and you would hope that people are that. And so all I mean from that is like a certain individual might have loyalty in him. A certain organization might go that way, but that doesn't mean that they have to. And I think that we're telling our youth that things are a certain way and that's how it is. And it's like, no, you can work as hard as you can. Here's one thing that I always tell parents and potential clients that I'm trying to sign is the NFL is unique in the sense that as soon as you get there, you have to work hard at not being there. As soon as you get there, you have to work hard at not being there. And they're like, what do you mean? And so I always say we were taught to work hard for what you want. So what happens to a lot of guys is as soon as they get there, well, they're going to work hard at being better, whether it's being a starter, whether it's being a Pro Bowler, whether it's being an All-Pro. Certain guys have a certain work and how they want to do it. Off season, what do you want to get better at? So it's hard to have a job that requires skills that you have to continually work on, but at the same time, you have to continue to use that free time you have to work for what you're going to do when you're done with this job, because it's a guarantee that it's going to end. And that message for me needs to be pushed more. We only want to keep talking to the guys that are failing, that don't have the skills or the talent to even get there. The teachers and the parents are telling them, have something to fall back on, but they're not telling the kid that says that they want to be the president that. They're teaching them about the legislative branch, the judicial. So even if they fall short, it's not involving athletics. They're getting to learn about that. The faculty that they're around is teaching them that. The faculty that the athletes are dealing with, they don't get any credit for it. They don't get any credit for it. They don't get to use it coming back. Because when they come back to try to get a coaching job that they should be the masters at or have a doctorate in, they have to be the graduate assistant. As if they don't have their PhD. As if they don't have their masters, because none of it counted in this institution of so-called higher learning at these colleges. So you're not paying them and you're not giving them any credit. But then we want to keep telling them how important education is when they can sit there and see the budget cuts. And then we want to just keep saying, oh, well, so-and-so want to go pro. Well, yeah, if they want to go pro in football, they had to have been at a university. There's a few exceptions like Eric Swan and stuff like that didn't go to college. For the most part, though, for football, you had to have gone to college. So in their entrance and in the 3 years that they were there, what's and the 3 hours a day that they're having practice, shouldn't they have a whole lot to fall back on? Especially all the money that they're making these schools and this faculty, right? But why isn't it like that? Let me see what else. But give me some feedback and help me understand it. Am I right from how I see it? I just see that we give a lot of BS to our youth. And we're telling them to work hard for what they want, and that's not really the reality. Son, daughter, niece, nephew, whatever. You could work hard for what you want, and you might not get it because there's going to be some other gatekeepers that are there at the door. Yeah, so just, that's the end of the show right there. It's coming up here on 30 minutes. This was a good one for me. I've had it with a few friends of mine, but I encourage your feedback. Please, tell me what questions you have. Give me some suggestions on what other topics that you'd like to hear. I have a whole lot up in the system for you guys. I'm going to be bringing on some more guests. I'm going to bring on some baseball guests. I'm going to bring on some angles from parent-wise. I'm going to be bringing some on the charitable side and everything. But the conclusion of this is, let's stop sugarcoating. And if we want stuff to change, we have to talk about what in the process are we going to change. Because everything right now is a process. It doesn't matter about who's working hard when you have to go through a process. It's how are you going to get through that process and get to the other side to actually do the work. There's a lot of great coaches out there that aren't coaching. There's a lot of great teachers out there who aren't teaching. There's a lot of great everything who aren't necessarily doing that because they can be good at something else. Because along the way, that's the educational part, and which is great. And that's what I want to tell. That's what I want people to start telling these athletes is you can be a great athlete and still not make it there. But along the way, you should be picking up a whole bunch of other skills. So there should be no narrative for a fallback. Right? And we should be giving that same message, but we should also, while we're saying that message, we should stop letting these other things that are attributing to them not having no fallback, if that's the word we want to keep using. I don't like it, but we can't keep saying it, but then we can keep letting an entity evolve on their end of it. Coaches' salaries are getting paid higher. Colleges are making more money. And yet still that same model that's the driving force for all those changes, nothing's changing on this end for it. They're not receiving any money for it. They're not receiving any credit for it, to which they could use later. So you can't keep pushing that narrative and saying that this is college and their students and they're using their time, but other people are prospering off of it. But then at the youth level, still tell them, well, you need to have something to fall back on. Well, let's tell all the damn youth that. It doesn't matter what they're a profession in. Teachers are getting laid off. People have degrees with no job. So we can't keep sitting here saying the same thing and acting as if, hey, if you go and you graduate, you're going to have a job. Because children are getting there, the youth is getting there, and they're feeling like, wow, like I'm bamboozled. I'm just in debt. But hey, I went to Cornell. Hey, I went to an Ivy League school. So that's all. Adrian Ross signing off. Appreciate y'all. All right.